That's not what I want.
I think you scared him away.
Okay, we are live. Why are we not live on Facebook?
Yeah, we are live on YouTube.
Facebook does this now. It changes the.
I think you scared him away.
Sorry, guys. Give me just a few minutes here. Facebook keeps changing the way they do these things, and yes, they keep changing the stream key. It's like you can't do that. I used to have the same stream key always. Okay. Go live. Now it works. All right. Yep. I need to check every time. I need to check the stream key. All right. Welcome, everybody. Wait. We haven't started yet. We need music, right? We can't have this without music. There we go.
The radical.
Now we can get started.
Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome on this fine, usually as usual, beautiful Sunday in Southern California, and I keep postponing my trip back to Puerto Rico. Last I heard, the governor of Puerto Rico is going to lock down the island again. So it looks like starting next week they're going into full lockdown mode. And so I'm staying in California where things are opening up. And as soon as they open up Puerto Rico again, we'll head back there. And in the meantime, I've got like speaking gigs. I'm going to speak. I'm going to travel to speak. I think some people would consider me a murderer or borderline, but I'm actually going to go and speak in public in Connecticut and in Denver in the next couple of months. So I'm excited about that. I'm canceling my trip to Israel and to Europe because they won't let me in. I'm 14-day quarantine in an isolation ward in a hotel. All right, today we've got our panel here, and they're going to be asking me tough questions and trying to trip me up. We'll see if they're going to be successful. We also have our first time ever. We have a super chat question asked before the show ever began. So we'll get to that, Joe, I promise, as soon as we do a pass through our contributors. Everybody who's on video here has contributed $100 or more on a monthly basis to the show. That is the criteria. So if you want to join in these live Q&As, you can do so by going to yaronbrookshow.com/support and contributing $100, or doing it on Patreon or Subscribestar, or any one of those panels. I'm still expecting like 4 other people. We'll see if they join over time, but we will get rolling. And of course, those of you who are not on video, you can ask Super Chat questions. And again, based on the amount of money you put in the Super Chat, that will determine the order in which I respond, although Joe will be answered first, I guess, because he just invested in doing this like 20 minutes before the show. All right, let's get started here. Jim, you're first.
Hey guys.
Hey.
Let's see. Sorry I didn't submit this in advance. I usually like to give you a little bit of a warning. I think this one won't be so hard as some of my previous questions, though.
Not a
how to refer to
myself. Say that. All right.
When I try to describe myself, when I try to use a term, depending on who I'm talking to, sometimes for simplicity, I'll say I'm an objectivist. But most of the time, I'll say that if there's any philosophy that I most relate with, it is objectivism. And I do this in deference to Ayn Rand's own principle of seeing of saying flat out, objectivism is a closed system, is whatever she said, whatever she wrote, whatever she thought. And I don't object to that per se, but then what would it mean for anyone to call themselves an objectivist unless they literally agreed with every last thing she said, which I don't. And I don't know that, I want to believe that there are not too many objectivists who really do. But bottom line question, as you can see, is what should I call myself?
Well, I mean, that's up to you. But at the end of the day, I don't think saying I'm an objectivist means that you've embraced that you are unquestioning of anything Ayn Rand ever said. First, not everything she said is in philosophy. A lot of what she said is in psychology or in other areas. And then I think that by calling yourself an objectivist, you're basically saying, I agree with the principles. I agree with the fundamentals as Ayn Rand expressed them. In terms of applications, I don't know. I'm not sure I agree with everything. So I don't think saying you're an objectivist means you agree with everything she said. I think it's useful to describe myself as an objectivist. I think it's good to get the term out there into the world. But I think saying you're a student of objectivism or saying that you follow objectivism, I mean, these are all fine as long as you get objectivism in there. Because I think it's good to get that there is such a philosophy and that it's a philosophy for living. People live by it or try to live by it. And that's what you're really saying. You're saying, I try to live by these ideas.
But then let me flip that over, if I may. If someone then says, oh, does that mean you believe in objectivism? If objectivism is that closed system, am I?
And you can say, I agree with most of it. I agree with the fundamentals of it. I'm not going to say here I agree with every word Ayn Rand ever said. You can make the caveats. You can then, you're not committed to having one answer. Right. Jonathan, You wanted to say something on this? You're muted.
Just quickly, Jim, in kind of casual context where Ayn Rand and objectivism is kind of a hot topic, what about saying I'm an individualist? I make choices based on my own decisions for my own benefit and with full context and putting it in that. Because most people, I think, Yaron, you always say that every audience says, yeah, I own my life. I would like to think that most people would like to think that they are individuals on some level.
Yep.
Well,
I think individualist is a great way. It's great, but I would like to see people using objectivist more, because I would like to get it into the culture that there is such a thing. There is a philosophy. There are people. And the more we not just say we're followers of Ayn Rand, which sounds cultish. No, we adhere to a philosophy. There's a philosophy out there called objectivism. And that's the kind of, so I'd like to see us using that terminology more, not less.
Thank you.
Jennifer. You're muted, sorry. Jennifer?
How about now? Okay. Can you talk about the differences between analogies and examples and how they can be used effectively in arguments?
God. What's the difference between an analogy and an example? I told you were going to trip me up today. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. The exact difference between an analogy and an example. An example is a form of an analogy, I guess. But an analogy is probably broader. Example is, but no, I'd have to think about it.
I would say that analogy is a subset of example.
Subset of examples. It's a type of example. That's probably right. Yep.
But you could have a concrete.
I really need to think about it. Sorry, Jennifer.
Okay.
She stumped me. Give her a star. Jonathan.
All right. Well, thanks, Yaron, and congratulations on all the shows you've been doing lately. I've enjoyed, especially a lot of the ones about music and Beethoven and all the rest. So please keep it up. Sure. I want to ask you, though, quickly about money, if I can, because I am in the business. I actually celebrated 20 years this August.
Wow.
With a record, I have to say, that beats the S&P, including my exorbitant hedge fund fees.
Wow.
And one of my specialties is off the radar screen assets, things that are unloved, illiquid, but ultimately go up, if you will. And right now, the only stocks I own are from Muslim majority countries. I'm not shitting you.
I believe you. All right.
Here's some of the, this is not investment advice. None of this is advice, but ETFs from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait. Now, I'm not going to try to sell you on the investments as an investment, but sure. Do you think it's moral and ethical for me to invest millions of my clients' dollars in those countries' stocks in particular?
So Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait.
And, most of the stocks are like National Bank of Kuwait, it's financials, it's construction. I mean,
not really private.
Well, I'll leave that to Dr.
No, there is no such thing as private in these places, even if they pretend to be private. I mean, it's a monarchy, and they're all monarchies in some way or another, right?
Especially given a lot of the heat you take about China lately, yep. So where do you put some of those ideas on? Would you invest in Saudi Arabian stocks?
I mean, I wouldn't. It's I consider Saudi Arabia an enemy of the U.S. In the same, I would say with Qatar, certainly with Qatar, where there's a lot of funding that they fund, directly fund terrorist organizations. They're the one somewhat supportive of Iran in the Gulf, outside of Iran itself, in Iraq. Kuwait is kind of neither here nor there. UAE is more friendly, but more positive, but I'm sure they're funding terrorism on the side as well. So I just think one extent or another, you are supporting your destroyers. If you could see that there was, if there was a real ban in these countries on funding terrorism, if they really were clamping down on their charities and on the other stuff, then yeah, I would invest in places that might not have the respect for individual rights that I would like. But again, even that is on a spectrum. But certainly if they're an enemy, if they're actively engaged in activities that undermine my life, then I would consider investing in them undermining of my life. And therefore I wouldn't do it, even if there was immense potential return there.
Thank you. I'll quickly just say, you've often talked about the transformation in China over the years, which certainly never became capitalist, but even that tiny little bit. And I guess on some level, knowing that there's a lot of risk for obvious reasons, That's a little bit of my hope that just an infinitesimal normalization there to, I don't know, I'm not going to ask for the 20th century, even the 19th century, you could see a lot of wealth be created.
Yeah, I'm not challenging the investment thesis. I think the investment thesis is probably healthy in the context of, and I'm not sure about Qatar in this context, but in the context of liberalization in Saudi Arabia and liberalization in UAE, and particularly if the king of Saudi Arabia dies, and I forget, MBS or whatever his name is, takes over and he's more modern, but he's also the guy who's responsible for the murder of that Khashoggi, the murder of that. He's a bad guy, even though he's
Howard Rourke.
But so is Deng Xiaoping, right? Deng Xiaoping was responsible for Tiananmen Square, but also responsible for the liberalization of China and for massive amounts of wealth creation and a massive amounts of relative liberty over there. So I'm not judging it based on their freedom or lack of it. I'm judging it based on, are they an enemy? Is some of my money going to literally undercut me? And unless you would have to show me that they are actively suppressing whatever elements within their societies are engaged in terrorist activities for me to do that. I don't believe China was, I still don't believe really it is, a threat to the United States, to my life. So even though investing there might have helped oppress some rights of the Chinese, it wasn't suicidal in the sense that they were after me. That's a distinction I will make.
Thank you for the response. I'll quickly just say, I encourage everyone to check out on one of Dr. Peikoff's podcasts. He talks about how he and Ayn Rand had to struggle with. There was a recording of a particular piece of music that I believe was produced in Russia, and a very cute story that I'm not equating my experience at all, but some of these issues that you bring up. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and it's very difficult to navigate the world in that sense. All right, Ori.
Hey, Ron.
Hey.
So this is actually kind of related to Jonathan's question, but you've talked on this show about how, despite the fact that we're probably going to go through a massive period of stagnation, you still think that we should look for ways to invest where we're investing in productive companies instead of just following the Peter Schiff line and investing in gold.
Yep.
So with that in mind, what do you think about investing in India with the idea that they could go through a China-esque period of growth as their economy industrializes?
So I am going to be doing at some point, I need to figure out exact logistics of this, but I am going to be doing a whole series of talks or podcasts about these ideas about where to invest in terms of the future, right? Not in terms of particular stocks, because I don't do that, but in terms of how to think about it. And certainly India is somewhere to look, right? So we'd have to establish the criteria, freedom, education, people with entrepreneurial spirit, a culture of entrepreneurs. And then you'd have to scan the world and find those places. And then figure out how to invest in them in the most productive way. And I certainly think that India would be high on the list in terms of that. I think much of Asia, I think you'd have to look across Asia and find countries, but I think much of Asia has the people, it has an entrepreneurial culture, and it has relative economic freedom to facilitate real innovation. And so my idea is, if you're going to invest, you want to invest where, in spite of stagnation, there will be growth, right? So we've had stagnation for the last 10 years, and yet, God, I wish I'd put all my money in Amazon, right? Because in spite of stagnation, Amazon stock has gone like that. And there are other specific stocks that, if you could have identified them based on this idea of ingenuity, of creativity, then they would have made you a heck of a lot of money. So, I'm working on a project right now, and that will try to codify a lot of my thinking about how to invest in a future when I predict that on a macro scale there'll be stagnation, but within that stagnation, some things go down and some things go up. And as long as people are free, and as long as human ingenuity is allowed to sustain itself, they are going to be big breakthroughs, and they're going to be incredible companies to invest in.
Thank you.
Phil.
Hi, Yaron.
Hey.
So I'm curious about your thoughts on the long-term stock exchange, and then kind of what your thoughts in terms of if you were to start your own exchange, what kind of rules and policies do you think would promote actual long-term investment and things like that?
So do you mean, what are my thoughts long-term on the stock exchange, qua stock exchange, or on the performance of stock indexes?
Oh, I'm talking about the recent, the new stock exchange that they created that's called the long-term stock exchange.
Oh, I actually don't know anything about the long-term.
You're the ones who are behind the Zoom or the.
Yeah, but I'm suspicious on anybody who calls themselves long-term anything.
Yeah.
It strikes me as dramatic bullshit to assume that they're the only ones who know what long-term is. Look, the problem. What's that, Jonathan?
But they were the ones behind the Flash Boys expose of high-frequency traders.
Yeah, they're trying to cut out sort of the high-frequency trading and that type of thing, and focus on long-term investment.
Yeah, as if nobody else focuses on long-term investment, right? As if my investors don't focus on long-term investment, or Jonathan's investors don't. I mean, it's complete. And the fact is that I love high-frequency traders and all the other short-term investors, because they provide me liquidity so that I can invest at really good prices and at low. I mean, what do I pay now? Commissions on stock, right? As an institution, what? Fractions of a penny. And if you're an individual using Robinhood, basically zero. in order to invest. So no, high frequency trading has been fantastic, but no, I don't buy any of that. I mean, to me, the problem with stock exchanges is not high frequency trading. The problem is not short-termism or anything like that. The problem is regulation. So the problem is that there's no competition in a real competition in exchanges. There's no variety of different rules across exchanges, so that we don't know how an exchange would properly evolve. We live with what is given us by regulation. Exchanges are heavily, heavily regulated. And there's no real difference between them anymore. They're basically all standardized by the regulatory regime that has been applied. If you go back even 20 years, the NASDAQ was completely different than the NYSE. Different stocks, different way of trading. It was mostly electronic. NYSE was much further behind in electronic. You couldn't trade NASDAQ stocks on the NYSE, and you couldn't trade NYSE stocks on the NASDAQ. There was true differentiation, and they had different, requirements to list on either one of them. Today, everything's monolithic. It's all the same. And for example, my view is that things like insider trading should be regulated by the exchanges, not by the SEC. So you could have a NYSE with one set of insider trading regulations, and if you didn't follow them, you'd be kicked off the exchange. And the NASDAQ would have a different set of and let the best insider trading rules win, right? We don't need a philosopher king to tell us what the best insider trading rules. The market can determine them, as long as you're not committing fraud, right? And that's not insider trading; that's real fraud. But in terms of the governance and how these things should be structured is optional. Let the market determine those kind of things, and that would have happened if you had real competition between exchanges. And there are a lot of things like that. Most of what the SEC supposedly regulates should be left to the market, and one of the ways the market would do that is through competition between exchanges. So right now, I mean, exchanges are just middlemen with no purpose, right? It's just a computer server that just matches orders. There's no purpose. There's nothing unique about them. And in the end, they will disappear, right? You will have some kind of peer-to-peer trading, and there will be no real exchange. But that'll be a shame, because exchanges serve the real purpose. And every time we reduce the involvement of an exchange, we replace the function of the exchange with government, with the SEC. So the only way to get rid of the SEC is to provide a more robust competition with exchanges. But that's why it's heading in the other direction, because statism never moves us towards more freedom. It always moves us towards less freedom. All right, let's do some super chat questions. Tyler, thank you. That's very generous. All right, so we have Joe. Joe's asking about Joe. So he's proposing something. This relates to the question I asked. So here's the question. We have a term for an altruist, right? Somebody who sacrifices themselves to others. We have a term for an egoist. What we don't have a term for is the Bernie Madoff and the drug dealer, who are neither one of the drug user. Neither one of them is an altruist, but neither one of them is an egoist. So what should be the term? And we proposed predator, vampire, particularly for the Bernie Madoff stuff. And I proposed self-destructive for both of them, right? Both, I think, fit the self-destructive. And Joe is saying, would ethical Darwinism, a philosophical Darwinism, suffice as a concept uniting both the ones that sacrifice themselves to others and the ones that sacrifice others to themselves? The idea being that they both accept zero-sum premise, like animals outcompeting each other or fighting over resources they cannot control. The only question being whether they are parts of a unit or are lone predators. I think ethical Darwinism captures both of those, but I do think it's useful to differentiate between people, between Mother Teresa and Bernie Madoff, right? I don't think it's useful to have them under the same concept. It's useful to differentiate between the people who sacrifice to others and the people who sacrifice others to self. And then it's useful to differentiate between those two and people who just commit suicide, who sacrifice their lives to nothing, right? And selfless captures all of them. Self-destructive captures all of them. And somebody suggests wraith, I guess, wraith, but that is against like a predator, I think. Anyway, it's I'm not sure we're going to come to a solution. I think at the end, the real differentiation is between selfish and selfless, between egoistic and self-destructive in a variety of different forms of self-destructiveness can take. All right.
Attempt to apply the term looters here? Ayn Rand.
I mean, looters is just another way of saying predator, or another way of saying wraith, or another way of saying, somebody who sacrifices others to self. But it's again, that's not the interesting example, because that is easy. It's the example of Mother Teresa, so we can say that's altruistic, but then it's the example of the person who acts in self-destructive ways that are neither altruistic nor sacrificing others to self. But again, that's self-destructive. Okay. How did you react? I don't have an answer to this, sorry. How did you react when Voldemort, he who shall not be named, right? Although I think I should probably use he who should not be named for Trump, because then I wouldn't lose as many subscribers as I do. How do you react when Voldemort hugged Draco Malfoy? What do you think he was trying to do? I apologize, but I just don't remember Voldemort hugging Draco Malfoy. I don't remember the Harry Potter books in that kind of detail. I generally enjoyed them. They definitely had a Christian undertone, particularly in the end, where basically Harry Potter sacrifices his life for the cause and gets resurrected. So he basically travels through a Jesus-like transformation in order to win, right? But I just don't remember it well enough to be able to comment on that. So if I ever read Harry Potter again or watch the movies, which is very unlikely, I've got a whole list of things that I have a higher priority than that, then I will comment on it. All right. One more question we have. What is the basic connection between morality and economics? Wow. That's a big question. I mean, the basic connection is that economic studies, it studies production and trade, which are, basically virtues, right? So it studies moral virtues. It studies what it means to act in a society for human survival, for individual human survival, right? And if you view that as a virtue, or if you view that as a vice, or if you view that as neutral, I think it's going to color the way you approach the study of economics, right? For example, most economists are collectivists in morality, right? And therefore, their whole approach to economics is a collectivist approach to economics. As an individualist, your approach to economics is going to be different as a moral individualist. So, the best, and of course, if you understand the role of reason in human life, then that is going to shape your approach to economics, because that's going to shape your approach to what production and trade require. If you don't value reason and you don't see its role in human life, then again, you're going to much more likely view economics as kind of a mathematical thing, as a collectivistic thing, as a description of a history of, but not as we're studying production, because production is a human activity guided by reason, right? And the principles by which we can study that. So your views about an individual, your moral views about individualism, are going to shape your views as economics. Think about, if you believe morally that the purpose of human life is to sacrifice for others, then that'll shape what your goal is in economics. Your goal might be not human flourishing, an economic system that achieves human flourishing, but an economic system that achieves human sacrifice. And that will shape your attitude towards socialism. It will shape your interpretation of economic facts. It would shape how you view sweatshops, right? You will want the able to sacrifice to the people who don't have anything, and therefore you will reject the idea of sweatshops as a means to wealth. You will advocate for people just getting money from the redistribution of wealth rather than investment of wealth. All right, Jim.
I'm being reminded lately as I'm getting more feedback on a lot of stuff on Facebook that there are an awful lot of people who are objectivism adjacent. And so, broad question, do you have some sense of some way to sort of categorize and even quantify the objectivist diaspora, the people who really are either very hardcore or just, around the margins, very sympathetic? Do you have some sense of scale and perhaps even geography or just ways of categorizing different groups? Or
I don't, because partially I don't know what it means to be somewhat sympathetic. What are they sympathetic to? If they're racists and they have some sympathy to Ayn Rand, is they adjacent or they are enemies, right? Like with the race realists who follow me everywhere and harass me constantly. They claim to be Ayn Rand fans and individualists and all this stuff, and they're racist at the same time. So I don't know how you categorize it without really doing a questionnaire and getting the numbers out there. I mean, there are millions and millions and millions of Ayn Rand fans. Many of them Christians. Some of them racist, some of them collectivists, some of them this, some of that. I don't have a sense of how many real objectivists there are out there, or I don't know. Tens of thousands, 100,000.
I was kind of thinking more like, I don't want to call anyone out, but people who identify strongly with it, but who may not be fans necessarily of ARI and kind of the official.
Why aren't they fans? Are they not fans because they're racist, because they're collectivist, because they just don't like me, because I said something to them sometime in the past and I offended them, and I don't know why people, and it doesn't matter, right? My view is it doesn't matter. Right? We all do our own thing, and we all try to promote the ideas to the best that we can, and we all try to get new people in. And my goal is not to create perfect objectivists. I don't know what that means. And I don't care if people call themselves, in the sense, I don't care if people call themselves objectivists. I like it because I like to get the word out there, but I don't, it's not important to me. What's important to me is that people live a good life and they live a healthy life. And ultimately, when the time comes that they support a political movement, a cultural movement that, and if they don't support ARI, then the question is, why don't they support ARI? And it's sad that they don't support ARI because ARI deserves this support and is doing good work to promote these ideas and get a cultural revolution. But if they don't, they don't. So I don't know how to quantify these things and how to figure out what's serious and what's not, or what's real and what's not. And, I have hundreds of people who hate my guts for not loving Trump. I don't know. What does that mean? What is that? Are they objectivists? Are they not objectivists? Are some of them just confused? Are some of them bad? Certainly some of them are bad. But when I say some of them are bad, then I say, yeah, all of it. If you vote for Trump, you're bad, right? They can't even hear when I say some of them are bad. And what I mean by some of it. So I don't know.
Only hundreds? You got to try harder.
Thousands of people hate me because of my position on Trump.
There you go.
Maybe, probably. I don't know. I don't know what the breakdown is.
All right. Thanks.
All I know is when I put up something criticizing Trump on Facebook, I get hundreds of comments denouncing me and sending me to hell. Are these from objectivists? Are they from conservatives? Are they from, I don't know who they are. Jennifer.
Why do you think, even among people that claim to understand individual rights and in most contexts, or at least some contexts, can apply it correctly, when it comes to abortion, that one subject, it's so hard for people to get it in that subject?
I don't know. It's very, I think because of Christianity, I think because of the role that religion plays in our culture and in our life. I mean, I can somewhat understand people having a hard time with the third trimester when it looks like a child, right? But to me, anybody debating against abortion in the first trimester it's just completely irrational. It just makes no sense. And the only thing I can think of is some, intrinsicism. Oh, well, that's the other issue. I'll get to intrinsicism in a minute. Some remnant of religion in them. But here's the philosophical issue. So, objectivism is a huge philosophical innovation in that we don't see the value in something in it or just in us, but in interaction between the two. Our consciousness's identification of something there is what the value is creates the value, right? It's not in the thing, right? So redness is not in, it's in our perception of the thing, right? It's the combination of consciousness and reality. It's in that intersection. And so when you talk about rights, we all have rights, human beings have rights, individual rights, then the rights are in the thing, right? And it's divorced of context. And they abandon context of in what context do rights arise. And I gave the example of you don't have rights on a desert island. The concept doesn't apply on a desert island. And it doesn't apply when you're in a womb, when you're not a fully developed human being out inside a woman's womb. The concept has no application. It's not that you have rights or don't have rights. There's no issue of rights. Rights only occur in a particular context, in a social context. To be social, you have to be separated. So it's not like I hate fetuses or I don't see the problem with, an abortion a minute before birth. Of course, nobody likes the idea and doesn't see an issue. And that I don't see an issue with late-term abortions. Of course, we see an issue with that, but it's not an issue of rights. Rights just don't apply here. And they can't see it because to them, rights the original conception of rights. Well, I don't know about the original conception of rights, but the conception of rights that dominated the Enlightenment was a conception of natural rights, which viewed rights as intrinsic to the human being. In a sense, it's part of your DNA. It's right there. And the people who ridicule rights, I did a show on Yuval Harari, and Yuval Harari says, there's no such thing as rights. We do an autopsy. You open up a human being, you look inside, there are no rights there. There are no rights in their DNA. There's no rights in their cell. There's no organ that's called rights. And when you view it as intrinsic, then you think it's a conception and you open yourself up to the attack of a Yuval Harari. But we don't view it as it arises. It's a truth that arises because of the nature of an individual human being in the context, in a social context. And that's a difficult philosophical idea for people to grasp. And it's much easier to be perceptual. Hey, it looks like a baby, therefore it is a baby. Or it's much easier for them to say, but we say human beings have rights and it's a human being. And as Leonard Peikoff talks about, they don't know how to, another tricky philosophical issue is a potential versus a reality. It's a potential human being, it's not an actual human being. These are philosophical issues, and people who don't have a good grasp, not of Ayn Rand's writings, but of what they mean, right, have a hard time with issues that are also emotional, like abortion.
So the religious connection would be God created you and rights
With
are part of
rights.
that creation.
It's again, it's an intrinsicist idea,
Yeah.
right?
it's
You
part of the
created
package
you,
of
yeah.
God
Absolutely.
created.
And religion is an intrinsicist. I mean, is an intrinsicist point of view. Now, note that intrinsicism always boils down to subjectivism. Since the thing is not there, the value isn't in the thing, then you saying it's in the thing is because your emotions, because you made it up. So it's at the end, intrinsicism is subjectivism. Religion is subjectivism. How do I know what God says? Because I feel like it. Right? Since God doesn't say it. Yeah, go ahead.
It's the same religionists who would be against physician-assisted suicide because they say, who are we to take life away, even when the life of that person is a life of pain and agony every second of the day?
Yes, I think it's the same religionist, but I suspect that the people who are trying to argue with me on my chat about abortion might not argue against assisted suicide. Because they'd be okay with you killing yourself in a sense. Because they have their mistake is in this intrinsic view. And, and that can be consistent with suicide. I have an intrinsic right, and part of that right is to kill myself, right? So if it's another entity, then that's where they get into trouble. All right, Jonathan.
I just want to say I have to roll my eyes and laugh. This kind of piggybacks a little bit, I think, on Jim's. I laugh and chuckle, Yaron, at people who are angry at the Institute because, they gave $20 for the last 10 years, and how come we don't have an objectivist country yet? Or how come we don't have an objectivist president yet? And they've been supporting the Institute. And I hope you don't feel like you in any way in your efforts have failed or the Institute has failed. I think not at all, completely opposite. I applaud everything you've done to preserve real objectivism, especially against those who would pervert it. And, to your and the Institute's credit, Yaron, I mean, and you've mentioned this, but it's true. Rand is the only writer who basically every politician has to have an opinion on. That's part of, I think, a big part of your efforts. And I do think you've changed millions of lives worldwide. You've certainly bettered my life and thousands of others. And I guess to those who are very frustrated about how come there's no objectivist world, I'm reminded of that story that Dr. Peikoff told of when he first read, I believe, the manuscript of Atlas Shrugged. And he said, oh, that's it. It's all solved. The world is, remember this?
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, that's it. Now it's all.
And he was actually depressed because he thought, I was going to fight for this world, but it's all over now. There's nothing to fight for anymore. There's no work to be done. She sold everything. It's done. And he was serious.
And I felt the same way. I felt this is it. This is true. So everyone is going to read this and get this. And then I believe Rand's comeback was, it's earlier than you think. And so my point is to say, don't feel like you failed in any way. I think you've succeeded. And it's earlier than we think, but it doesn't make me less inclined to keep up the struggle and the passion. So
yeah, I mean, we got to fight. What alternative is there? And one of the things I've noticed is whenever I ask people who are unhappy, what should we be doing? They either don't know or have ideas that just don't make any sense, or ideas we've tried and failed, right? So it's a lot of it is that people don't even know how much we've done, how much we've tried, how much we've stopped doing because it didn't work. All of this stuff. It's very hard, and I understand it's very hard to be on the outside looking in because you're not aware of all the debates and discussions. But look, I mean, nobody is more frustrated that we haven't made more progress than I am. Because
all the international editions of her work, all the international speeches that you do, you've changed a lot of young people's lives, and that is the future. It's not who's running for office today.
But I'm still frustrated. I agree. Still frustrated because I should have 100,000 or 500,000 followers. Where are all those people who I've talked to in all those 100 countries I've been to, where all my students, I mean, once in a while, somebody will write to me and say, I remember you from, and you changed my life and stuff like this. But I'd love this to be bigger. There's no question. It frustrates me. It's not bigger. And if I had an idea how to make it bigger like this, I would do it. And I'm open to ideas, and anybody who has ideas. I'm not even saying that I or anybody here knows how to do it. Just, somebody put these billboards up. So somebody's asking about the billboards.
It's really awesome.
And it's cool, right? But the fact is, I don't think I've gotten one subscriber because of the billboards. I haven't seen any uptick. I haven't seen any impact. I haven't seen any effect of it. I still think it's cool, but so I'm open to ideas. I'm open to doing these things. I'm open to trying different things. Just sent the remaining money from the billboards, and the billboards it's exciting. It's fun to see. And then what is the impact, and how do you measure it, and how do you know? And maybe it'll only be a year from now that we know that there was an impact, and maybe it takes time. I just don't know. But I'm open to trying pretty much anything to see if it'll work, because it's hard to tell what'll work and what won't. It's really hard.
Well, keep it up, and thank you again.
Thanks, Jonathan. Oh,
I think this is one of the reasons so many people, me included, keep toying with the idea of having a place where people have a Galt's Gulch, essentially, on the thought
Puerto
that
Rico. Come on over.
If only we could show the world a concrete example. And yet every time I think it through, I come to the same conclusion. Ain't going to work yet.
Nope. All right. Oi.
Okay, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to pose it anyways because I want to hear what you have to say about it. Is pride an automatic response to achieving your values, or do you have to willfully award yourself with pride?
I mean, pride is not, pride is an attitude towards your values. It's not a pat on the back. It's not you patting yourself on the back. It's you taking your values seriously. It's you striving for those values. And the result is self-esteem. The value is self-esteem. So pride is an action. It's a virtue, right? It's an action. And the action is, I am serious about my values about my values and virtues. And my most important values and virtues are my moral values and virtues. So I think Rand describes it as seeking moral perfection. So striving to be perfect morally. And remember, Aristotle called it the queen of the virtues, right? Because again, it was striving to be rational and in everything. It was striving to be honest. It was striving to have integrity. It was it's the thing that drives you. And the pat on the back, the recognition, which I think results in self-esteem, is also, you have to recognize it, that you have to contemplate yourself. You have to be able to say, yeah, that was good. Yes, I achieved that. To yourself, right? Yes, and that's the sense in which you mean, right? But yeah, it's an activity. It doesn't happen automatically. It doesn't. It might, because you could automatize that thing, right? But you have to initiate it. And you might, I think some people, John Galt probably do that when they're young. And then by the time they're adults, it's already automatized and they don't think about it. So when you achieve a value, you relish it. That is what builds this up. And if you do it, it'll happen automatically. You won't have to consciously think about it. And you see, altruism fights that, right? So altruism is saying you achieve a value and you start feeling happy, you start feeling satisfaction, and altruism sticks its nose into your business. But what have you done for the poor lately? Or why aren't you at the soup kitchen? Or why are you being selfish? Think of others first. Don't think of yourself last. And it purposefully deflates you. And that's what you see when people are happy in the moment because they've achieved something great, but it can't last. It completely goes away, very quickly, and that's the
I remember that from before I read Ayn Rand. I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll come because it's your mother's voice saying, don't think of yourself, think of others. And it's a powerful voice, and it's the whole culture's there right on your shoulder, looking at you and judging you.
Or even the explicit rejection of pride as the most important evil.
Yeah,
so
and
yeah,
I mean, the amazing thing about one of the things I enjoy about sports is that at least in the moment, they embrace their success and they recognize their achievement. Except in football, where they almost immediately go down on the knee and cross themselves, which drives me nuts. It's the only sport, I think, where the immediate response is, thank you, God. You don't see that as much in basketball. When they take a shot and he goes 3-point shot and he goes in, you don't see them go, thank you, God. It's like, yes, I did it. I don't know why. But in sports, you see that action. Now, I don't think it lasts because I think ultimately, the altruism is still there. Right? But at least in the moment, they embrace it.
Yeah, in the post-game interview, they're just thinking God the whole time, and everyone.
What's that?
I was just saying, in the post-game interview, they're not talking about themselves anymore. They're thanking God for winning the game and everything.
Again, in different sports, it's different, right? I don't think Usain Bolt, if you saw him run the 100 meters, ever thanked God. I don't know. Maybe he did, but I don't remember him ever. It was like, God, I did it. It was me. I'm there. Yours at the arrow thing where he does that stance, and it was all about.
You still supposed to thank God?
What's that?
If you blow it, do you still thank God?
Yeah, well, I always make fun of the football players. Like when they catch the ball, they thank God. When they drop it, do they say it's God? It's your fault. Why did you let me drop the catch? No, only the good stuff, right? When somebody dies, do they accuse God of anything? But when a baby's born, they thank God. I mean, it's only one way. God gets the credit, none of the blame. And when they do question, when they do give God the blame, like in the book of Job, when Job complains to God, oh my God. I mean, does God come after him for daring to complain, right? I mean, if anybody wonders about the God of the Jews, they should read the book of Job and see what a sadist he is. And not just a sadist, but a narcissist, a narcissistic sadist. That's what God is in the book of Job. All right, Phil. I should do a whole show on the book of Job.
So this question is kind of related to Jonathan's question. In terms of growing your audience, I'm curious, what do you see as the limiting factor? Is it ideas? Is it money? And then in terms of, do you have ideas for if we were to double our contributions or 10x our contributions or even 100x our contributions, what could you do with that money and that kind of thing?
So I think it's ideas. I think it's ideas and money, right? So money would be needed to implement the ideas. And I think it's a certain type of ideas, right? And the type of ideas are basically marketing ideas. I'm not a good marketer. As every marketer who's ever looked at my stuff will tell you, it's presented, even though the content's not boring, it's presented in a boring way. The titles, the stuff like that, right? And there's not a lot of marketing that's done to promote it out into the culture. It's not in the right format, context. There just needs to be more of it in different ways. So if I had, and I don't think 2X would do it because I live off my savings these days, but the 2X would basically become income. But if it was more than 2X, I mean, I think what would really help launch this into another dimension would be a marketing team, a marketing and production team that basically devoted their time to helping me come up with topics, putting together titles, and then marketing the content. Then I would hire Don Watkins to be my co-author for life, right? He would just he'd just become my co-author forever. And we would start writing, and here you would say we do op-eds, we do books, we do articles. You got to get this material out there, and then we'd have a marketing team that not only promoted this on social media but also to TV and newspapers and things like that. And you'd really have a cohesive team of people who was dedicated to getting this stuff out there in a variety of different formats and different contexts. And I think that would be what would really accelerate this and make it big. And I think if we did that, then you'd get, like, you want to get to a point where Joe Rogan kind of can't not interview you. Like, he's on TV all the time. He's got these new books out. He's got, like...
Jordan Peterson blew up. It's why your point about sharing, I think, is important, because people blow up because of one little thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the Tea Party blew up because of Rick Santelli's rant. So sharing is so important, and that's what grows your audience.
Yes. So I'm disappointed in how little sharing there is of my content. There's very little. The only stuff that gets shared are the real short clips of me going ballistic on somebody at a Q&A. And there's just not that many of them. And it doesn't bring a lot of people to me because, I don't know, because they like my take on switch ups, but on nothing else or whatever. But Jordan Peterson, the thing about Jordan Peterson is when he blew up, there was tons of content of his for people to consume. And that's what I hope happens if we ever hit on a topic that blows me up, that, gazillion top. There's a gazillion, people can really have a lot to consume if that happens. But I don't know. I mean, I wish I knew more, because there's a sense in which, I'm pretty well known out there. And that's why the numbers disappoint me, because in spite of that, the numbers are not exciting, right?
One idea that
I don't know what it is exactly. Is it that they know and they've rejected, or is it we still don't? It's still not enough who know, right? That's what that's why we'd have to ramp up this marketing team and content production team to figure that out, to figure out what is really going on. Yeah, Jim, sorry.
And part of that is you're just a hot potato. Nobody really wants to, deal with an unknown. But one of the ideas that I think that, sorry, that was a bad way to put it, but I think you know what I mean.
No, I'm laughing because I just got a text from my other co-author who is complaining that I'm giving credit only to Don and not to him. And let me tell you, Brad, that if you were willing to come on board and write whatever I wanted you to write, tomorrow you're hired. I'm taking you on. I don't think that's that's the nature of our co-authorship history. Oh, go ahead. But I have ideas for I have an idea for a book right now that I do want to write. I have an idea for a whole project that ultimately will connect to investments, that will create a whole funding stream. I have this big idea, and I've got a partner to be continued in the next few months. So ultimately, will result in something people can invest in. So that's we're working on it. So I'm hoping to, but I need a book for that also. So I might have to rope Don Watkins into it.
So yeah, this is not a big idea. It's a small idea, but it may actually have an impact. You brought it up yourself, response videos. This week, a virtual nobody did a YouTube video as a sort of response to Tim Pool, and it looks like it's going to be really negative. And actually, he essentially was superficially thanking Tim Pool for helping to change his life by inspiring him. And really, it went viral because his life itself is incredibly inspiring. And that that really propelled him from having a very small number of people subscribe to a very large number just by responding to a well-known personality.
I mean, I think response videos are good. And if you guys see videos that you think I should respond to, send them over. Not 2-hour videos, send over like a 10-minute clip, because otherwise I can't do it. But, and I'm going to try this. It's an experiment. I am going to live stream the debate on Tuesday with commentary by me. So I'm going to pause them and comment. Now, I have a feeling we're not going to get through 5 minutes of the debate, right? Because I'll have 2 hours of commentary on the first 5 minutes.
Why not just tweet it? Because that way you can get more viral. That's otherwise.
So I've done that in the past. I did that, and maybe I'll try both ways. So I'll do one. I'll tweet a one. The next one I'll tweet. This one I'm gonna try to do. If there was a basketball game going on, then no, I couldn't tweet it because I couldn't tweet. I should just tweet the basketball games. That would be more productive. I'd enjoy it more. So does that answer your question, Phil?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so it really is money, but only because money would buy me the skills that I don't have. And right now, I'm consulting with a PR guy. I've got a woman who's trying to get me on television. So I'm doing bits of it and pieces of it. I was supposed to be in C-SPAN, and then, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and they bumped me. And so we're trying different pieces of this, but at the end, I need people who I hire who can execute on these ideas, because I just don't have the time or the knowledge on executing. And now I'm on TikTok. And by the way, what it means that I'm on TikTok is somebody's taking my videos and shrinking them to whatever TikTok size it is and putting them up. So there's no new content on TikTok. It's just reshuffled content on TikTok. I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, on Facebook, and YouTube. I don't know what more, but I'm sure there are people out there who could come in and revamp what I do and make it much, much better. All right, super chat. All right, Ashley's asking, is there a way to share an idea with you about how to increase shares? Should I email you through the website? Email me. You can email me at yaron@yaronbrookshow.com. yaron@yaronbrookshow.com. So that goes directly to me. All right, why is there such a high regulation in healthcare? Is it demographics? Older people consume more healthcare dollars on Medicare, or are they cultural, philosophical factors? It's altruism. It's altruism. So there's more regulation in healthcare because we don't trust the selfish doctor and the selfish hospital and the selfish healthcare provider to do it for profit. So we need to regulate them and control them. We don't trust the selfish drug maker because of altruism. And we know that these people over here who are sick and are old and maybe they're not getting the best healthcare in the world, and we should provide to them. So how do we do that? Well, we use the government in order to provide them, and that's how we get Medicare and Medicaid. So the way altruism works is, one, it causes you to distrust the marketplace and the participants in the marketplace. And two, it encourages you to replace the marketplace with government, to subsidize the needy and make sure you take care of them. And you can't rely on charity, again, because people are too selfish to provide enough charity. So you need to force them to provide enough charity, which is called the welfare state. So that's the case of all regulation, right? Of everything. And healthcare is particularly so because it's so obviously, it's so directly impactful on human life. And when they suffer, it's so perceptually obvious that people are suffering. You don't have to think too much to see the suffering. When is my conversation with Peter Schiff going to happen? I still don't know. I think Peter's still in Connecticut. I'm still in California. My assumption is that it'll happen when we are both in Puerto Rico, and we can sit down and do it hopefully in his place, because I think he has more room than I do, and just do a podcast together. We'll see how that goes. Do you think Rudy Giuliani is able to enjoy his fortune and public adulation? God, I hope not. But no, I don't think he can, actually, because I think the moral is the practical, and the immoral leads to unhappiness. And if you look at Rudy, he doesn't look completely there. He failed in his presidential run. That was his dream, ultimately, was to go from mayor to president. And he failed, and he had that opportunity because of 9/11 when he was and I just don't think he's a happy person, because I think happiness comes from fulfilling life-affirming values. And I don't think he has. I think he's dedicated his life to life-destroying values. And I think unhappiness happens with that. Okay, we're going to take Eric's question because he put a lot of money on it. If altruism is Latin for otherism, and egoism means selfism, how about using the term devourism, or simply the English translation devourism? Devour means to eat up greedy or ravenous, or to use up or destroy as if by eating, or to prey upon. I like that. Devourism. So, so the Bernie Madoff is a instance of devourism. Is devour come from Latin? Devour. Okay. Interesting. People are getting creative. I'll give you that. A lot of real creativity, devourism. Okay, devouring other people. That's good. Sucking the life out of them. My three-up boss built a plant in India and refused to bribe officials for permits, yet agrees to 80+ agencies approving our 50 million capital expense. How can people in the company hold both opinions? Well, because I think one they view as the rule of law, one they view as part of the system, and they worship the system. They worship democracy. They worship the bureaucracy. They worship the way government works. So one is within the government, within the context of laws, and the other is outside of it. It's just this greedy individual, right? So the regulations are for the common good, for the public interest. They're there for a reason. Bribery is selfish, in quotes. It's just for this one person. There's no common good. There's no public interest involved. And they can't see that the regulations are just there for the, for the power lust of the people who pass them, who use altruism as an excuse. But look, regulation are consistent with altruism. Bribery is not. That's the bottom line. Everything in the end, everything rotten in the world, ultimately, in one way or another, you can boil down to altruism. That's why I hate Christianity so much. What do you think about Ayn Rand's book, Ideal? Until recently, I had no idea such book existed. I really liked it. Yeah, it's terrific. It's passionate. It's interesting. It's full of interesting characters. It's, again, deals with this issue of egoism, of individualism, or what that means. It's a beautiful book. And it's being staged, and you can actually find, I don't know where you can find the scenes from the staging. They're very powerful, very impactful. So yeah, I highly recommend reading Ideal. Okay, let's see. Jim.
Oh, I'm all out for now.
How is that possible? All right, Jennifer.
Do you think in old days, like I used to think when I was a kid and my grandparents were crabby, do you think in the old days people were just nastier to each other because they were hungry and cold and hot and their back hurt, and because life was physically harder, so people were in a bad mood and treating each other worse?
Do you think that's true? Do you think people treated each other worse in the old days?
I'm just asking. I mean, maybe my grandparents were just crabby.
Maybe your grandparents were just crabby. My grandparents were really nice. Oh no, well, one pair, the other pair not so much. But I not because they had any physical ailments, just because they were. I had very religious grandparents, so that'll do it.
If life is physically harder, would that make you in a bad mood
I don't
more?
think so. I mean, because the 19th century was maybe some of the most benevolent, an incredibly benevolent time, at least in certain places. And life was much harder from that perspective than it is today. I think it's much more to do with the culture, with the particular people first. It's hard to extrapolate from just the people you know. But, you know, a culture, so I think it's a cultural question. And I think the more collectivist a culture is, the more oppressive a culture is, the more altruist a culture is, the more religious a culture is, the more crabby it will be. And the more individualistic, the more egoistic, the more capitalistic, the more benevolent it'll be, the more positive people will be towards each other. The more people think of each other as zero sum, the more negative the culture will be. The more they think of each other as added win-win, the more positive the culture will be. So I definitely think that it's very much a cultural, philosophical sense of life issue. And I think religion is a big problem, you know, that causes malevolence. But I think people were less religious in the 19th century, certainly in their day-to-day activities than in some places they are today. I just can't think of people being more nasty than they are today on social media. And their life's pretty comfortable. But maybe it's because they're anonymous that they can be as nasty as they are.
Maybe people don't have as much self-esteem now, so they're too afraid to be jerks to people. That's why they can just hide behind the computer screen and do it. But in real life, everyone thinks they need to be super nice.
I think that's definitely the case, that it's a big part of it is self-esteem. But yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know about your grandparents, that era, but certainly the further back you go, and certainly pre-World War I, the culture, I mean, pre-World War I, from the middle, let's say, of the 19th century to pre-World War I, the culture was more benevolent, much more benevolent. And you can see that in the arts and in the music and in so many different ways, right? I mean, whenever I say something about how beautiful classical music is, well, I mean, people go, oh no, heavy metal. I mean, whatever you think of heavy metal, it's freaking dark, right? And it's grunge. It's about how ugly the world is. And I mean, you might like it, but fine. But it says something about a culture where that is considered like the best. Anyway, the nicest time to live in the Western world was 1898 to 1913, says Frank. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that was a great time to live in some respects. I think today is a great time to live from a material perspective. No better time than right now. From a comfort perspective, from a health perspective, there's no better time than right now. From a sense of light perspective, I think 1898 to 1913 was probably the best time ever. Jonathan.
You mentioned some of the staging of Ayn Rand's ideal. And, you know, I believe at Ocon, the Ayn Rand Institute staged some Ayn Rand with a cast of actors. And at the gala on this Friday, they're going to be doing the same thing, which I found really moving to see some of her work actually staged, but for Zoom. So I definitely would recommend that.
So the gala this Friday, we're going to be staging Scenes from Atlas Shrugged. And by Zoom, but in real high production value, so special sets and everything. It's going to be really cool. And you can still, I think, sign up for the gala on the Ayn Rand Institute website. And it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It's really cool. I want to quickly actually follow up on what I think Jim or someone said about classical music, a question I wanted to ask you before. But I love classical music, but I really can't stand opera. I grew up going to both. And as soon as the opera starts, I fall asleep. I find it dissonant. I can't tell where one song starts. The classical music, so all the ones you talk about, Beethoven, Mozart, it's mathematical. My brain is almost filling in the blank spot. And opera, it just sounds messy and boring to me. Why is that? And what does that mean?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it probably means that you had a bad experience with opera when you were young, and you kind of didn't really give it an opportunity, didn't really give it a chance. So I think my answer to you before we started was, you need to go with me to the opera.
There's a difference. I mean, there is a difference generally between a lot of opera music and classical music. Opera is...
There is in a sense that opera has a story. Opera is staged, and opera uses the human voice as another musical instrument, in a sense, to convey ideas, and it has a text. But I don't think there is in any substantive sense. You say the magic flute. I mean, magic.
The only one I can stand.
The only one you can stand. I really think it's an issue of trying to open yourself to it as an adult now, and treating it as drama with music, right? And not and giving it a chance. Now, look, I love opera and I love music, and I find ballet boring. And I know people who think ballet is the best and opera and classical music are less. I think partially it's you, right? It's your values, conclusions you came to, maybe from whatever, something about opera doesn't appeal to you. It does to me. They're all great forms of art. I don't think there's one superior to the other. I think opera is the most complex of the three because it involves the most elements. But they're all great forms of art, but certain forms of art might appeal to you for a variety of reasons more than others. Some because of conclusions you've come to, because of the operas you happen to have listened to, because of all that. Opera is boring. It's the exact opposite. It's engaging and sweeping and emotionally satisfying in a way that is hard to find anything else. But you have to approach it right. And when it's okay not to agree, just like it's okay for me to like Beethoven, for Ayn Rand not to, right? And Ayn Rand loved operetta. I like operetta, but I love opera more than operetta because operetta, and I know, and I know people who, she preferred operetta to opera. So I don't think you can make an aesthetic evaluation of one being superior to the other. I think they're all potentially great. And then it's a personal decision beyond that, which you can try to expand your horizon or not, because I mean, it's not worth my while to expand it to ballet. I've got enough. Right?
Well, actually, I feel the same way quickly about Pink Floyd that I do about opera. It's these like long songs that don't sound like anything. There's nothing you can really hum along to. It's just like this sweeping, it's just, I don't know where it starts and ends.
Well, there's your problem, right? You can't treat opera as songs. It's not songs. And of course, there are opera arias that you can hum along to. There are many. And I bet that I could, I'm not going to, but I bet I could start a tune and you would continue it. Even though you don't like opera, you would recognize it and you would continue it. So I don't think any of that is right. And Pink Floyd is truly depressing. That is absolutely true. But that's the beauty of it. It evokes a certain emotion, which is a negative one, but it's really good. Like, I mean, when Pink Floyd came out with The Wall and you have all these children going into that meat grinder, I mean, I completely sympathized, right? And it was about British education, which I'd spent 2 years of my very, very young life in. And it was like, yeah, that's me going in that meat grinder. That is absolutely exactly what they did to me, or tried to do to me, I guess. Anyway, but it's, Pink Floyd versus opera. Yeah, it's not the same. Not the same. All right, Ori.
If you were just starting out your career today and like considering the direction the country is going and all the regulation, would you go into finance still? And then as a follow-up to that, what area within finance do you think you have to deal with the least amount of government regulators, whether that be like venture capital, hedge fund business? It's probably not investment banking.
So I don't know why I went into finance to begin with. So I don't know how I would going back. I mean, what the hell? I liked it, so I went into it. There was no conscious long-term plan there at all, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. Basically, until I got to the Ayn Rand Institute, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I was 40, but 39 by the time I got to the Ayn Rand Institute. So I didn't really find my calling or my purpose until then. I think finance is great, and it's interesting, it's challenging. There's a lot of money to be made. There are areas that are less regulated. I mean, the hedge fund business, particularly if you stay under $100 million, is a lot less regulated than if you go over $100 million. I have, it's one difference between me and Jonathan. I have a compliance department. He doesn't. It's a
I'd
big
like to have one day.
Yeah. Venture capital is very unregulated. Very little regulation goes into venture capital. But hedge funds, relatively speaking, are less regulated. They're much, much more regulated today than they were 10 years ago, certainly than they were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it was really a Wild West. It was great. Hedge fund business, the original hedge fund businesses in the 90s. Oh my God. I mean, and they made a huge amount of money, and they were real pioneers, and they were completely unregulated. So I'd say absolutely there is a lot you can do within the world of finance, and it's interesting and it's fun, and it's applied economics. So finance is applied economics. You have to know economics. You have to know something about economics. You can apply the economics. It's really, really good. Jonathan should do a podcast on why he's investing in Saudi Arabia. That's what I would listen to. I want to know what the investment thesis is for investing in Saudi Arabia. I can kind of see it.
Stay tuned.
Interesting. All right. Phil.
Oh, that's all I had for today.
All right. Who's Chaim? Why are you saying Chaim? What's that got to do with anything?
It's just a separate thing in the chat going on now. It's a separate combo.
All right. That's life in Hebrew. All right. Well, I mean, there's also no super chat questions in the super chat. So we are out. Any of you have any more questions? Happy to take them. We've got about another 10 minutes. Jonathan, Jennifer.
Yaron, there's a difference between progressive rock and heavy metal, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. One I like and the other I don't.
Yeah, me too. I don't like, so I think I know what you mean with metal or whatever. I don't like that either.
Yeah. I mean, progressive rock doesn't necessarily have to be depressing, although it often is. And dark. Doesn't have to be dark, although it often is.
Yeah, but a lot of it's not.
Yeah.
Some of it's not.
Yeah. Jonathan.
Quickly, as long as we're talking music, Rand talked about her tiddlywink music.
Yeah.
And I have often thought about my own contemporary version of that. And, could I think of as some fun pop, very joyous pop as my contemporary tiddlywink music?
Sure. I think so. I think generally pop is a category of the music we listened to when we were teenagers, right? And there's certainly, some very joyous, positive that you could view in the same way. Nothing comes to mind, I have to say.
I just think of from my era, Walking on Sunshine or Call Me Maybe.
Okay.
Fun, simple songs that you want to conduct to, you want to they're joyous songs. I don't know. To me, that seems like Rand's tiddlywink music today.
Yes, I think that's right. Although there's a purity to the tiddlywink that I don't know. I don't think that they capture quite in the pop music, but and it's why operetta is so wonderful is that there's a purity of joy, beautiful melodies, just simplicity, just beauty in operetta music. Her favorite operetta composer was Kalman, who is a Hungarian who I think wrote most of the music in Vienna. But what is going on between Jonathan and Ashley? Something's going on with this Haim stuff. On my chat, and then they won't even tell me what's going on. They won't share it with me. So I encourage people to try operetta, and I saw some live operetta in Austria, and that was a lot of fun. Talk about American music and why it flourished in the U.S. I'm not sure what American. I mean, the most American music is probably jazz, and it flourished in the U.S. You know, I think because it captured a certain sense of life of Americans. It was it wasn't too. It didn't require too much time. It didn't require super concentration and attention. It could be viewed, like we do with pop music. And then the other American music, I mean, most of American music, what we think of American music, and I know I'm going to insult people here, right? Like came from the UK, right? What is American? I mean, the Rolling Stones, British, Beatles, British, Rush, Canadian. I mean, what American music? Pink Floyd is American, maybe. So a lot of the innovation in rock came from the UK. I mean, the real place in which the US really innovated and created a genre is jazz. But why is everybody asking me about music, a topic that's impossible to talk about because I know nothing about, not in the sense of music, right? I just have opinions. All right, Andrew says, you're at a competitive disadvantage as a public intellectual in being a rational thinker in a culture that values preserving inconsistent thinking. Yes, I think that's true. But God, there have to be like 1 million people on planet Earth who would value a rational thinker. That's who I want. I want those 1 million who value, and it has to be out of a population of 8 billion. There's got to be 1 million that value a rational thinker. That is my hope. And then it's just a matter of finding those 1 million people and converting some of them, because I know I've converted some of you. So, hopefully those. I wish you'd listen to Orion by Metallica. It's uplifting and not dark. All right. But then I have to listen to Metallica. All right. I'll try to listen to Orion by Metallica. And I know there's heavy metal that is uplifting, but generally as a genre, it's dark. All right. Anything else on music? On other topics I know very little about? Yeah.
Is there any rap music that you like?
No.
No?
No. I mean, I don't know any rap music. So even if I'd say, oh, I like that tune, I don't know it. I don't know who it is. I don't know, Jay-Z. You may mention these names. I have no idea who they are. No
Jay-Z
idea.
sucks.
I don't know Jay-Z. I don't know if he sucks. What's his name who's running for president? I know him because he's running for president. I've never heard a song of his. I can't stand it. It's, to me, anything, and I've said this on a show before, anything that is built primarily on a beat, and that includes a lot of rock and a lot of popular music. I mean, what I hear is the beat, and the beat is it goes nowhere. It's repetitive. So here's me hypothesizing about music, right? And I know nothing about this. So take it for what it's worth, which is very little. And I think this is somewhat based on Ayn Rand hypothesizing about music. So again, but none of this is true. So according to a definition of art, art is a recreation of reality based on an artist's metaphysical value judgment. So the question is, what is music recreating, right? And I think that what music recreates, and I think this is my understanding of what Ayn Rand wrote in the Romantic Manifesto, it's recreating our processes of consciousness. Think about it recreating thinking, in a sense, the process of thinking, not a particular thought, but the process, the logic, the flow of thinking, of a thought. There's a certain sequence that is rational, and then there's just noise. And noise is, not thinking. Noise is randomness in consciousness. and it hurts. When there's noise, when some of these modern stuff they put on an orchestra, it hurts. It makes you uncomfortable because like inside your mind, it's like be unfocused. Everything's unfocused. Everything's out. Nothing's. So music reflects somehow the way our consciousness works. It's a recreation of that. A beat, a constant kind of beat, to me is the most then simplistic, boring kind of thing that your mind can do. It's repetitive. It's the same thing. It doesn't develop. It doesn't grow. It doesn't advance. There's no complexity. It's like a little child's, what the child can think, right? The very simplest of any kind of conscious activity. Whereas Beethoven or Brahms or Rachmaninoff or Tchaikovsky, whole thoughts, whole worlds are created. It's your consciousness thriving, identifying identifying reality, reintegrating it, coming up with new ideas, discovering new thoughts, and everything. All the induction and deduction that is necessary for that to happen is reflected in a great symphony. Right? And there's repetition there, but it's always a little different. Just like when you're trying to really understand something, you have to constantly integrate it with different things. So it's the same thought, but manifest in different ways. The same as a musical theme, and jazz does this to some extent. Reinterpreted in different ways and in different. That to me is what music is doing and why it's so powerful, because it's recreating your most intimate activity, which is your activity of your particular consciousness. Anyway.
So, but classical music, it's probably the best form of music, but it takes so much effort to listen to. You can't be doing something else while you're listening to classical. Yep. What I like about rap, first of all, rap is music from self-esteem. Like the subject of the songs is the self-esteem of the artist a lot of times. And I can't really think of any other music that's like that, maybe some rock. But if you don't want to just be like laying down, listening to classical music, if you're working out or getting ready or driving, I think that's like, you need a different form of music other than classical because you don't have the.
Sure, and I will take any pop music. And I think the reason rap does it for you is because that's what you grew up with. I could just put it on the 70s channel and I'm fine, right? Anything from Captain and Tennille to Pink Floyd, anything done in that period, I'm fine with on the radio. And I can, so yes, I think you need something that's just simple and straightforward in the background as it's happening and as background music. Classical is not background music. It drives me nuts when I walk into, I don't know, a big hall and there's vague notes of Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto. I want to tear somebody's eyes out. I think it's disrespectful to me and to Rachmaninoff and to everybody because I want to either focus on the conversation on the music. I can't do both. It's very much of the time, but some music grates on me, and if it's overly repetitive, it grates on me, and I can't listen for a very long period of time because it just gets boring. My grandparents got me into classical and jazz, and I got them into Metallica. Stefan won't let me alone with our Metallica. Plus, he's comparing me to his grandparents. Which is not making me feel particularly young these days. There is a classical element to some of the early music. I mean, I think a lot of progressive rock and other rock, there is elements of classical music in them. And a lot of them were trained classical musicians. I mean, even I don't know if you've ever listened to Nina Simone, but even if you listen to Nina Simone, you can tell she's classically trained, the way she approaches the music. And there were others, popular artists that when they approach it with classical training, it's pretty amazing. One of the great tragedies of somebody like Nina Simone is that she was trained as a classical musician, a pianist, and she was really good. And they wouldn't accept her in that world because she was Black. And she basically became a popular musician, not because that's what she wanted, but because she couldn't make it in the classical music world because she was Black. And that is true about the classical music world in the 50s and 60s. It was hard to break into, very rare for a Black musician to break into. Yeah. Ooh, Ashley likes Nina. All right. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you for the support. Don't forget to like the show. Don't forget to share it. Don't forget to support the Yaron Brook Show on yaronbrookshow.com/support, Patreon, Subscribe Star, or Locals. Bye, everybody. I'll see you on Tuesday for the debate.
Thanks, Yaron.
Thank you,
All
Yaron.
right. Thank